On this episode of AV Week, the AV industry already getting ready for 8K and the infrastructure to support it, creating exceptional AR and VR experiences, and what's trending in the world of AV. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 401, recorded Friday, May 3rd, 2019. On the horizon.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
And by
AV Pro Edge, manufacturer of next-level video distribution solutions.
And by Audio, a leading manufacturer of professional PTZ cameras, Pro AV solutions, and UCC integration systems.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we gathered for this week. First and foremost, Mr. Brock McGinnis from Westbury National. Welcome, sir.
Good to be here, Tim. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Always. Thank you so much. Also with us is a young man that has not been on for quite a while. His name is Joel Billheimer from Pershing Technology. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim, and I greatly appreciate being referred to as young. I will tell my children that.
You are the youngest person on this call, I do believe. So. I think you have me beat by like 2 or 3 months, so we'll go with that. And last but not least, the left-hand side of my brain, his name is George Tucker, and he works for Sound Associates. Welcome, sir.
Hello, thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, guys. First story we have coming up actually comes from AVNation.tv. Talking about Kramer's new 8K multi-format switcher. Real quickly, as a kind of a disclaimer, Kramer is an underwriter of AVNation. They announced this week that it will be showing off a new 8K multi-format digital matrix switcher. The unit will be modular, meaning you can take the ins and outs and kind of be swapped around. They support HDMI, HD-Base-T, DG-CAT, fiber, DVI, VGA, and SDI, which is an awful lot. Brock, I'm going to start with you on this. When in the process of moving from one resolution to another, meaning we've kind of some folks are kind of already getting into 8K. So the resolution we're moving from, as crazy as it sounds, is the 4K. Moving in the 8K. When in that process do we need infrastructure supporting the larger resolution?
As an integrator, I think we have to start thinking about the cable plant and ensuring that the glass that we're putting in or the copper that we're putting in is going to be capable in future of handling 8K. We don't have any 8K requirement on our horizon right now, but it is something that kind of tech smart, tech savvy customers are beginning to ask about, and so we're considering that in our designs.
All right, Mr. Tucker, what sort of content is out there right now? Or are we just, putting, as Brock said, making sure the cable plant is in place for when the content does get there?
Well, I'm not clear on normal content, but I did read just recently that is it PlayStation or the Xbox coming out will have an 8K output.
Okay.
That's the PS5.
Is the PS5
next year?
There you go. I'm an Xbox guy, as much as I'm not brand centric. Usually, I'm an Xbox guy. And as you well know, Tim, I am actually looking forward to Battlefield 5 or 4 or 1 in 8K. It might just be interesting. So no, I haven't seen a heck of a lot. I'd also heard a lot like in medical. I've heard some of medical stuff, medical exploratory surgery cameras being out there, but that's about all I've seen.
All right. Joel, we'll wrap up with you on this. You work a lot in the government field. Is this something that they're already looking at, or maybe they're already looking at? I guess the next step would be 16K.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are certain specialized applications that the government or the military customer base will use for various reasons, particularly high resolution mapping, things like that. I would say I would definitely second the PlayStation concept, but push that kind of in the realm of esports. I think obviously the government doesn't have a huge role there, but I think esports is definitely a growing area, and that would be probably one of the main commercial markets. And then one of the other areas I would think would be oil and gas. Energy companies, they have a huge need for geological mapping, which is very power intensive, and there's a lot of attention paid to 3D modeling in that environment. And so I would think that 8K would be a need for them as much as a want.
To drill down for a second, though, on the esports thing, this is something that honestly I've seen two sides of this debate. One side that says, yes, it's an absolute vertical that we should be going after as an AV industry, and the other side that says, well, it's just kids playing games, and there's no there, right?
It's $1 billion kids playing game. That's what it is.
Well, and you've got George Tucker playing games, and no disrespect, but he's no kid. But I think the issue there is, people who say it's just kids playing games, that's what it was 30 years ago. This is an industry that makes a ton of money. I mean, you can be a professional video gamer, and not just someone who streams on Twitch or something. You can earn $100,000 with prize money and branding as a 16-year-old kid. But and unfortunately, gamers do tend to be young because of the reflexes and the hand-eye coordination that's required. But we're also, going back to your question about government, that is actually a recruiting tool now for the military. You don't have to necessarily train a fighter pilot or a drone pilot, because you've got someone who's already got better physical skills, and they've been training for 10 years. It's anyone who looks at that and says, I don't care about it, fine, I'll take your business, because you're really missing out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next story here comes to us from our friends over at AV Magazine. Philips is launching an augmented reality display configurator. Commercial integrators can use a mobile device to tell where and how digital signage would look on a particular wall or space. Not to point out the obvious, but it would be Philips displays. Customers, though, can walk through, quote unquote, the experience to kind of see exactly how the installation would work. Mr. Tucker, we'll start with you on this. How can integrators capitalize on AR, on augmented reality?
So that's one of those things that I've been trying to write about for a while. Like we've written about drones, and you can never see an application. But this virtual reality, augmented reality stuff, I think has a lot of potential for the business, especially this, walking through a client and saying, hey, here's what it looks like in your environment. This is not just a modeled workspace. This is in your house. This is in your office, and you can see exactly where that placement would be. And I think that's a huge benefit to selling the product or selling the service, because it really does have that impact. I also think it's really, really going to be something that we see with the glasses, that we're going to be selling these things to technical services people. So you have to get something done and do it in a certain order. Those glasses will be connected to something that, with the augmentation, will be able to map what you're looking at and to guide you to exactly where you need to go. Sort of teaching grandma which button to push on the remote, I guess, is the technical one you could use there. But yeah, I could see selling this. When I worked in staging, we would try to show people the stagecraft with this sort of wire frame and some skins on it and a nice picture, and say, here's your booth. And we found an incredible amount of return when we would put it into an actual 3D model that they actually looked at. And sometimes we put glasses on, and sometimes it was just on a really large screen. But that effect can sell more than almost anything I've ever seen. And I think it's going to be it's a great product to put out there. I would love to see it.
Well, it helps also kind of, it takes the idea from a CSI spec and actually gives folks a real world visual of what you're talking about, what you're designing,
in the comfort of your own home,
or your office.
Right.
Joel, same kind of question. Where can integrators go with this sort of technology?
Yeah, I I definitely agree with what George was describing. I will say there are elements to that that are not new. We I was working at a particular government agency back in 2006, and we used a Second Life instance to do exactly that, to show to various individuals at the facility and in the power structure, what their new facility was going to look like, how they would interact with it. Now, obviously, that was using the technology that existed 13 years ago, but I do think this speaks directly to what Avixa is going for, right? Customer experience. If you are really going to immerse your customer in the end product, then you have to start immersing them at the beginning of the process as well. I think it's great. I think it's, probably 2 years from now, we're going to look back and think, oh, how quaint that Philips AR tool was, because there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds more exactly like it.
Brock, what other uses should integrators start looking for when it comes to AR? And honestly, let's not forget the fact that VR is still out there and as a viable technology as well. But what other use cases should we look for?
I hope I never have a client that is so stupid that they need to imagine what the TV is going to look like on their wall. Because that, it's a physical device. You can look at the TV, you can look at the wall, and you really should be able to figure that out. There are other things that we do, though, particularly those involving light, that do require visualization. And anything that is spatial, and George would have experienced this in the stage world as well, the theater world. A lot of what happens in lighting actually happens between the tops of people's heads and the ceiling. I mean, you're creating a three-dimensional canvas that can be exploited with motion and color and the creation of depth perception. And clients have a real difficult time, seeing that and understanding it. So, from I think if we're doing something, an installed system that is going to be incredibly difficult to visualize, then we'll do some sort of AR model or demonstration. We recently did a 3D projection mapping demonstration using a Pico projector and a foam model, so that the client would understand what it was going to be like on their structure. But in the staging world, I'm pretty sure that our lighting and effects people are doing this now all the time, in trying to help ensure that clients understand exactly what they're getting without us having to build the whole system. Cheaper to render in software, and there are lots of tools that are available for that. This Philips piece doesn't wow me, and a Philips TV doesn't look any different than anybody else's TV. So this is a marketing piece, and I don't think that it moves technology or the world ahead very much. But helping people visualize in 3 dimensions is a big deal.
Did I read, maybe I didn't read the article in depth enough. I thought I did, but I thought it would also present some of the content you would put on those walls with it, so that you get a better visualization of how that works to your lighting and the effect that has in the room. I thought that was part of it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think
that would be something I would look for, because you're right. I would agree that just putting a TV on the wall doesn't do a heck of a lot.
No.
Yeah.
And
just don't put it above the fireplace.
And the impact the TV is going to have on the rest of the room is not all that sparky either.
Yeah.
All right. Final story here, guys, is it comes to us from AV Network and SCN. It's a recap of the weekly conversation on Sunday mornings called AV in the AM. If you are not familiar with AV in the AM, and you are on Twitter, so those two qualifiers right there. If you're not on Twitter, you can at least get on Twitter and follow the hashtag. AV in the AM was started and is moderated weekly by Chris Netto, who's now at Stern Marketing. Chris typically puts out 3 or 4 questions about the AV industry on Sunday morning, typically around 7 a.m. Eastern-ish. Twitter users then can join or just follow the conversation using the hashtag AVNAM. This past week, though, he had a conversation on emerging trends in the industry. Conversation began with Chris asking what trends members of the community had seen thus far. Answers ranged from esports, back to Mr. Bellheimer's point, to more mergers and acquisitions. So I will ask all of you, and Joel, we'll start with you. What trends are you seeing this year?
Well, so I know that this is going to sound to Tim and George and anyone else who remembers the last 5 or 6 times I've been on this show or who've read articles that I've written with Tim. I do actually believe that product security is starting to enter into the audiovisual marketplace. Now, obviously, coming from a government perspective, it is a standard requirement for our products, but we are starting to see a recognition, particularly with the expansion of IoT, that even embedded products, particularly products that, like audiovisual products, happen to have exceptionally high bandwidths that go across networks, are inviting targets for hackers and other malicious actors. And so that is one trend that's especially coming out of the financial services industry, but also just general corporate security, that we're seeing requests coming into our company and into some of our clients, specifically for non-governmental security certifications and hardening practices. And we're actually doing some consulting with academic institutions and some financial institutions on how to do that, both at the component level, at the system level, and also at the operational level. So I would say that, again, I know it sounds like I'm finally, tooting my own horn, but I do believe that is a trend that, as time has come, and which will continue very strong. What I will also say is that the trend towards cloud services goes hand in hand with that. I'll certainly let the other guests talk a little bit more, but I think cloud AV is a capability and a practice who hasn't quite come yet, but in a couple of years, I think that's going to be much, much bigger.
And I would agree with you. And the one thing I would point out, the fact that the Department of Defense is getting ready to award a $8 or $9 billion contract for cloud computing. And the last 2 participants in that battle is Amazon and Microsoft.
Yes, yeah.
The DoD is actually,
you're talking the
JEDI.
There's actually 2 contracts, believe it or not. There's the JEDI contract, which is the one you're talking about, where Amazon is the projected odds-on favorite, and Microsoft Azure is really the only other competitor. Oracle and Google claim to be, but realistically aren't. And then the other one is an $8 billion contract called BEOS for Defense Enterprise Office Services. And that is probably going to, my guess is that'll end up being a Microsoft solution for, Skype and Teams and things like that. So, in the course of 1 year, you're going, or maybe 2 years, depending on the timeline, you're probably going to have $18 billion in cloud money that are specifically targeted for DoD.
Yeah, and in other words, the government is finally doing cloud, which is would from a security standpoint, to me, says that there's at least a level of security that they're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Mr. McGinnis, same question. What trends are you seeing?
So I have the advantage of being an active participant in AV and the AM. Some of us in corporate enterprise AV talked a lot about how everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon with Teams or Zoom or one of the other soft conferencing products and link their product to the kind of conferencing software that people seem inclined to use these days, and that's a good thing because the adoption rate is just accelerating like crazy. but it's being interesting seeing the dance amongst AV manufacturers to stumble over themselves to have new partners.
Yeah,
and
good.
And to Brock's point, I would take that as a warning, because if you are a small to mid-market integrator, for example, and you're used to building out these spaces, well, now a piece of software, a webcam, and a laptop can do 90% of what the customer wants. So if you can't figure out, to Brock's point, how to capture that and how to take advantage of that and how to integrate that, maybe at an enterprise level or with some kind of value add or a services capability, you're going to be in a lot of pain.
So that ship sailed quite some time ago, Joel. And most of us actually have figured out that 10% of the rooms are going to be complex and expensive and need us, and 90% of the rooms are going to be fairly simple and might not need us. But if we're great service providers and we're convenient and we can respond quickly and we're affordable, the same people who buy the 10% expensive rooms are going to continue to buy the 90% inexpensive rooms. And the thing about it being 90% is people just can't get enough of those rooms now. And it's, companies adding, can I get 4 more meeting rooms? Can I get 6 more meeting rooms? Which is fantastic, because more and more people are using video, just like we are today, and are comfortable doing so. I made a sales presentation to a room full of people yesterday. We couldn't get our schedules to coordinate. That was done on Zoom, and was at least a good experience for everybody involved, doing it by video as it would have been in person, and probably saved me $38 in parking.
That's a good, that right
alone.
There, yeah, seriously, that right there is indication of Brock's point, the fact that more and more people are adding these every single day. All right, Mr. Tucker, last word on this. What are the trends?
Well, so all that Brock and Joel have talked about, I think is spot on. But something that I've been noticing, and this is a little bit off the beaten path as I'm wont to do, is understanding that a lot of the gear we remove is still usable. The waste that we produce is enormous. And it's not just in the packaging, and it's not just in the cabling, that we have to just toss. I am seeing a lot of people talk about, hey, look what I just removed. And people are trying to find a use for it. And I think there's a secondary market, or at least a reuse market, and recognizing how we throw away so much stuff, and we need to be more attentive to it. We're not quite a green industry, and we make a lot of money on saying, oh, those TVs are old, and that audio system is old. Rip it all out, throw it in the bin, throw it in the dumpster, throw it in the landfill, and let's put in this new shiny whatevers. And you're happier, and it sounds better, and it does more, and yay. But I am watching that. I am watching a lot of people find record players or old amplifiers that are still good. They're just not good for the application that they're putting a replacement in for now.
So what should I do with my 50-inch plasma that is currently sitting in a corner of my house?
Well, does it work?
Send it to me. No, it's a plasma.
Oh, absolutely it works.
There are people who love plasmas. That's almost like an addiction of people. Yeah, Tim is raising his hand here on the video portion of it.
Now,
I know,
Tim,
guys,
it's a 720 plasma, and it doesn't have HDMI in it.
Well, you can go a DVI, so you're gonna have to have audio and video different. Okay, but
yeah. It's not DVI either. This was not a digital input device.
How is it?
Does it have component, or is it just like an S video connector, or a
VGA?
VGA.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting. Well, yes, and we need to be. What do we do with it? That's my question.
Right.
What do we do with it? It's going to go in a landfill. Plasma and what that's made of is not the nicest stuff in the world, and I'm not trying to be a tree-hugging green here, but when you're throwing away perfectly good amplifiers or perfectly good, speaker systems that could be reused for some other purpose, yes, finding that purpose can be difficult, but I see a lot of guys talking about the vintage gear and wanting something to do with it.
Okay, but hang on for a second. Vintage gear is, and maybe it's because of my age, vintage gear to me does not mean a plasma, as much as I do love them. Vintage gear means tubes, tube amplifiers.
Well, yes,
and
But-
one of your favorite things, weighted knobs.
Can I interest you in a blue 160?
But the larger question in that is vintage. There's an attraction to it, right? But what do we do with this stuff? What do we do to solve this problem of always replacing? That our business is based on throwing things out and replacing it with shiny new.
No, so the metal bits, the province of Canada that I live in, Ontario, we have an electronic stewardship and recycling program for electronics. They none of that stuff ends up in landfill at all. The metal is, of course, all recyclable. The plastic is virtually all recyclable. Glass is recyclable, and all of the metal bit, the rare metal bits are melted out. So there is something that we can do with electronics.
I think it brings up an interesting point, and I don't disagree with what we're saying about recycling physical devices, but I think it does speak to the way that our systems have been designed and implemented, of course, over the life of our industry. And George, I don't know if this is the direction that you were kind of going, but I think one way to respond to that is to say, well, we have focused so much on having every single part of the chain from source to destination, from ingest to display, be a new thing every single time, and also that those components are obviously sold by vendors, they're installed by integrators, they're maintained by service providers. But if you couple that with some of the other trends we're talking about, whether it's cloud or mobility, which we didn't really touch on, all of that infrastructure can be handled by other components, other systems in probably better and certainly more efficient ways. So it may mean, to your point, that we're not looking at owning the center anymore. Whether that's because of cloud, whether it's because of a green approach, whether it's because of cost efficiencies, or any other number of factors, it may mean that we focus pretty much exclusively on the edge. And Tim, I think that is the biggest trend. And that's not just a 1-year trend. That's probably a 5-year trend, maybe a 10-year trend. But I think AV is very, very close to the tipping point of being an edge-only industry.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. That'll be kind of where we put it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Mr. Brock McGinnis, thank you for joining us, sir. A pleasure as always.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a while. I think we missed a cycle or two with some scheduling difficulties, but I love being part of the AVNation community, and thank you very much. I don't know if you've seen, I'm supporting an AVNation supporter right here, and thanks to all the manufacturers and companies that support AVNation. This is a great service you do for our community, Tim.
Thank you, sir. And if you're listening to the podcast, he was showing an Extron S3 cup that I actually have one of those too. How do people find you and or Westbury National?
Westbury National is based in Toronto. We are westbury.com. I can be reached there. You'll also see me from time to time on Twitter, where I am at Brock McGinnis.
From time to time. He's very humble on that. He's there. And again, the AV and the AM conversation is a really good conversation. And Brock is really, well, it depends on the week, obviously, but pretty heavily involved in that. Mr. Tucker, thank you, sir.
Thanks. Great to be on again. Good to see you all. You can find me on Twitters.
And Sound Associates at Infocom.
Yes, well, I was getting to that, but I can be found on the Twitters. I'm at Tucker2s. But I will be at Infocom, both manning the booth for the company I work for, Sound Associates, at booth number 5542. And I will be teaching a class on Wednesday, June the 12th. It's MT, Michael Thomas, 45, and that's it's about accessibility systems for theater and cultural institutions. So it's everything about the setup, the laws, the requirements.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mr. Billheimer, thank you, sir, as always. Appreciate it. How do people find you and or Pershing?
Well, the simple answer is it's actually very difficult to find me, but I have no social media presence whatsoever. But you can, if you wish to get in touch with Pershing Tech and talk about security, AV, or how attractive Tim Albright is, we are at pershingtech.com.
I'm not sure that's a valid use of that website. You're also teaching a class at Infocom. So how do people find you there?
I am. I will be on Super Tuesday. That's the 11th, from 1 to 3 in, I believe, Whiskey 307 Charlie Delta. We are going to be talking about open source in AV and not just using Linux, but even such outrageous concepts as devising open source control systems and distributing them completely open source to your customers and the community. So I'm sure it'll be greatly appreciated within the Infocom community.
I think the more and more end users that come to Infocom, I think that I would argue that they would find it. They would at least appreciate it. I'm not sure about the control manufacturers, but we can have that conversation.
Look forward to seeing everybody there.
Absolutely. For me, for AVNation, don't follow me on the Twitters at this point. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that St. Louis gets beyond Dallas in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But for us, for AVNation, go by the website, avnation.tv. avnation.tv. There you will find our list of supporters. These are the companies that help us financially, and we do appreciate their financial support. Help us bring you AVWeek and ResiWeek. And in about 5 weeks' time, all things Infocom 2019. While you're there, you can also register for our annual tweet up. We call it a walkthrough party from 4 to 6 on Wednesday, June 12th. A bunch of folks come in. You kind of, as you're going to your next event, come by the room and grab a drink, grab something to eat, shake hands, and trade business cards with folks. So we can register there, and that is also brought to you by Infocom and Stern Marketing. So we appreciate that. Our next webinar is May 22nd on AV over IP, looking at the specs and what you need to know actually as you head into the Infocom show in June. So check that out. You can register there as well. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.